This is not an ordinary dog. Behind the loyal appearance of a giant pet lies a true warrior, a former military working dog who endured brutal years on the battlefield. When his handler made the ultimate sacrifice, the dog was sent home to protect the family left behind, a promise that transcends death itself. No one expected that his military training would once again be activated when danger approached his new family. Is the bond of love and protective instinct strong enough to face deadly threats? Have you ever wondered what depths the connection between humans and animals can reach when faced with the unthinkable? Where are you watching this video? Please share and follow the story below so we can spread this warmth to every corner. The Nevada sun, a relentless, molten eye in the vast cerulean canvas, beat down on the Caldwell Ranch. It baked the ochre dust fine as silt, bleached the weathered timbers of the fence posts, and cast long, sharp-edged shadows that crept slowly across the sprawling, quiet yard. The air hummed with the dry heat of late morning, thick with the scent of sagebrush, creosote, and the faint metallic tang of distant rain that never seemed to arrive. Silence, vast and profound, was the property's most abundant resource, broken only by the buzz of unseen insects and the occasional cry of a hawk circling high overhead. Further out, near the sturdy, reassuring bulk of the barn, 12-year-old Chloe Caldwell's laughter pealed, bright and clear against the quiet. She was engaged in an energetic game of fetch with Aries, her colossal Great Dane. Aries, a magnificent creature of slate-gray coat subtly brindled with darker stripes, moved with an impossible liquid grace. His 170 pounds of lean muscle rippled beneath his hide as he leaped, twisted, and landed softly, the oversized red frisbee held gently but firmly in his massive jaws. His movements, fluid and economical, hinted at a power held expertly in check. To the infrequent FedEx driver or the even rarer neighbor driving past on the remote access road, Aries was simply what he appeared to be, a gentle giant, impossibly large perhaps, but undeniably devoted to the slight, energetic girl with the sun-streaked brown ponytail. They might marvel at his size, the sheer presence of him, but see only a beloved family pet enjoying the desert sunshine. A guardian, certainly, by sheer virtue of his intimidating stature, but nothing more. But beneath the calm, watchful gaze of his intelligent amber eyes, beneath the placid surface cultivated over 2 years of civilian life, lay the deeply ingrained instincts and hard-won experience of a seasoned warrior. Aries, call sign Havoc during his service years, was no ordinary dog. He was a decorated veteran, a retired Marine Corps military working dog, MWD, with 3 harrowing combat tours in the rugged, unforgiving mountains and dusty plains of Afghanistan etched into his very being. He had faced threats most humans couldn't fathom, sniffed out danger invisible to the eye, and stood shoulder to shoulder with his handler in situations where death was a constant, palpable presence. Now, in the seeming tranquility of the Nevada desert, he was on his final, most crucial mission, protecting Chloe and her mother, Dr. Eleanor Caldwell. He was a living legacy, a promise kept, a silent sentinel standing guard over the remnants of a family shattered by war. Inside the cool, shadowed interior of the ranch house kitchen, Dr. Eleanor Caldwell stood watching them through the wide window above the sink. The terracotta tiles felt cool beneath her bare feet, a welcome contrast to the heat radiating through the glass. Her hand, holding a half-empty mug of cooling coffee, trembled slightly. It always did these days when she let her thoughts drift back. Eleanor, a respected historian specializing in 20th century military conflicts, possessed a keen analytical mind and a penchant for meticulous research. Yet the landscape of her own recent past remained a territory fraught with emotional landmines. 2 years. It felt like both a lifetime and the blink of an eye since the day 2 stoic Marines, their faces etched with a practiced, somber sympathy, had stood on her doorstep. Her husband, Captain Michael Caldwell, Aries' handler and partner, had been critically wounded during their final tour. An IED strike on their convoy near Helmand Province. Michael, strong, brave, eternally optimistic Michael, hadn't survived the complex cascade of injuries. But even in the face of his own mortality, his thoughts had been with his family and with his four-legged partner. He had pulled every string, called in every favor, ensuring that if the worst happened, Aries, also injured in the blast, though less severely, wouldn't be left adrift in the military system. He would retire, be medically discharged, and come home, to their home, to protect Eleanor and Chloe. Eleanor swallowed the familiar lump forming in her throat. Aries had arrived a few months later, bearing the visible and invisible scars of war. A slight, persistent limp in his left hind leg, courtesy of shrapnel, a sensitivity to loud noises, thunderstorms, fireworks, even a car backfiring down the highway that sent tremors through his massive frame and glazed his eyes with a remembered terror. Post-traumatic stress disorder. It wasn't just a human affliction. Aries, like so many veterans returning from the crucible of combat, carried the ghosts of Afghanistan with him. The transition had been challenging. Aries was initially withdrawn, wary, constantly scanning his surroundings, his calm belied by the tension coiled in his powerful body. He startled easily, sometimes growled low in his chest at unfamiliar sounds or sudden movements. There were moments Eleanor had doubted her ability to care for him, moments the sheer weight of Michael's absence, coupled with Aries' trauma, felt overwhelming. But Chloe had been his anchor, her quiet, unwavering patience, her innate understanding that transcended species. She never pushed, never demanded affection. She simply was. She would sit beside him for hours when he was anxious, reading aloud from her favorite fantasy novels, her young voice a soothing balm. She'd gently stroke his broad head, whispering reassurances. Slowly, painstakingly, she had drawn him out, helped him navigate the bewildering landscape of peace, forging a bond of mutual healing and profound trust. Now watching Chloe expertly toss the frisbee, seeing Aries' joyous, bounding response, it was almost possible to forget the hardened military asset he once was. Almost. But Eleanor knew. She saw the way his eyes constantly swept the perimeter, the subtle shifts in his posture when a distant sound caught his attention, the deep intelligence that assessed every situation. The warrior was still there, dormant but vigilant. She glanced at the clock on the microwave. 8:15 a.m. "Chloe!" she called, her voice carrying through the open window. "Time to get ready, sweetheart. School bus will be here soon." Chloe snagged the frisbee midair one last time, gave Aries an affectionate pat, and jogged towards the house, her face flushed, her ponytail bouncing. Aries followed, his gait marked by that slight, characteristic hitch, but his presence radiating quiet dignity. His slate gray coat, meticulously brushed by Chloe each morning, shone like polished steel in the desert light. "Mom, can Aries please come to school with me next week?" Chloe asked as she burst through the back door into the kitchen, dropping the frisbee onto the counter with a clatter. "It's Heroes Week, and my presentation is on military working dogs. He's the perfect example." She slung an arm around Aries' thick neck as he sat beside her, his head easily level with her shoulder even while seated. His warm amber eyes flickered between mother and daughter, seemingly understanding the negotiation. Eleanor smiled, reaching out to smooth Chloe's perpetually windswept hair. "Oh, honey, I wish he could. But you know the school rules. No pets allowed, not even retired war heroes with distinguished service records." Aries nudged Chloe's hand with his nose, a soft rumble vibrating deep in his chest. At 7 years old, he was in the prime of his life for his breed, a formidable specimen of canine power and grace. "He's not just a pet, Mom," Chloe protested, hugging him tighter. "He's family. He's Aries." The name held weight, a significance only they truly understood. "That he absolutely is," Eleanor agreed softly, her gaze meeting the dog's intelligent eyes. "And because he's family, his very important job is to stay here and guard the house while we're gone. Keep everything safe until we get back. Now upstairs, young lady. Get dressed, brush teeth. We don't want you missing the bus." As Chloe's footsteps thundered up the wooden staircase, Eleanor knelt beside Aries, scratching that spot behind his ears that always made his good leg thump rhythmically against the tile floor. "Keep an eye on things, soldier," she whispered, the words part of their daily ritual. It was a quiet acknowledgement of his past, his purpose, his ongoing duty. Aries' ears, cropped short in the military style, pricked forward. He leaned into her touch, pressing his cool nose against her hand in a familiar gesture of understanding and acceptance. Sometimes Eleanor swore he understood not just her words, but the complex emotions swirling beneath them. Her grief, her anxiety, her profound gratitude for his presence. He was more than muscle and instinct. There was a soul in those amber depths, a soul forged in loyalty and tempered by loss, just like hers. 20 minutes later, Eleanor backed her sturdy SUV down the long gravel driveway. Their 5-acre property offered unparalleled privacy and space for Aries to roam, a deliberate choice Eleanor had made after Michael's death. It minimized potential friction with neighbors who might be unnerved by Aries' size or his occasional moments of anxiety. From the large bay window in the living room, Aries watched them go, his stance alert, protective, unwavering, a silent promise in his posture. "I am here. I am watching." Neither Eleanor nor Chloe, heading towards another seemingly ordinary Tuesday of work and school, could possibly fathom that the fragile piece of their isolated world was about to be shattered. They couldn't know that forces were already converging, drawn by the perceived vulnerability of their quiet life, utterly oblivious to the retired warrior standing guard within. 3 miles down the highway, tucked behind the crumbling facade of an abandoned sun-bleached gas station, a nondescript black cargo van sat idling, its windows darkly tinted, engine emitting a low, barely audible hum. Inside, the air was thick with the stale smell of cigarette smoke, cheap air freshener, and nervous sweat. 4 men were huddled around a flickering laptop screen, displaying high-resolution satellite images of the Caldwell Ranch. "The place is perfect," Viktor Sokolov said, his voice a low growl, heavily accented but precise. He tapped a thick finger on the screen, indicating the ranch house. "Isolated, nearest neighbor is Petrov woman, quarter-mile east, old, probably half-deaf. No line of sight." Sokolov was a man built like a concrete bollard, with cold, pale eyes that missed nothing, and a reputation for brutal efficiency within the Eastern European crime syndicate he served. This job, acquiring Dr. Caldwell's access credentials, was crucial. Pressure was coming from above. Failure wasn't an option. "What about the dog?" asked Dmitri, a younger, wiry man with restless eyes nervously cracking his knuckles. He zoomed in on an image captured days earlier, showing Aries standing near the barn, looking deceptively placid, but undeniably enormous. "That thing, it's a monster. Looks like it could take a man's arm off." Sokolov waved a dismissive hand, though his eyes lingered on the image for a moment longer than necessary. "His pet. Big, yes, but stupid animal. Pampered house dog." He exuded a confidence he didn't entirely feel. Something about the dog's posture in the photos nagged at him, a stillness, an alertness that seemed out of place for a simple pet. But doubt was a luxury he couldn't afford. "We have tranquilizer darts. Use them if you must. Quick, quiet. No shooting unless absolutely necessary. We don't need local police getting curious before we have what we need." The other 2 men, Ivan the driver and Sergei the tech specialist, nodded grimly. They had been tracking Dr. Eleanor Caldwell for weeks, meticulously gathering information since learning about her specialized work. She wasn't just a historian, she consulted for major financial institutions, advising on cybersecurity protocols, particularly those safeguarding international wire transfers. Her knowledge, her access, was the key to unlocking a fortune. Funds belonging to rival organizations, funds Sokolov's employers were eager to divert. "The plan is simple," Sokolov continued, his cold gaze sweeping over his men. "We monitor the property. Mother leaves with girl for school. We move in, secure the house, disable any alarm Sergei finds. We wait. Girl comes home from school around 3:30. We intercept her before she reaches the house. Cleanly, no witnesses." He paused, letting the weight of his instructions sink in. Once we have the daughter, the mother will cooperate. She will give Sergei the codes, the passwords, everything we need. Understand? Nods again, more firm this time. They were professionals, albeit brutal ones. Fear was a tool they understood and wielded effectively. Leverage was everything. Good, Sokolov grunted, checking his watch. Plenty of time. Ivan, stay with the van, monitor comms. Dmitri, Sergei, you're with me. We establish positions, observe routines. We move precisely at noon. What Sokolov and his crew didn't know, couldn't possibly comprehend from grainy satellite images and distant surveillance, was the truth about the pampered house dog. They had no concept of Ares' background, his specialized training, the battlefield instincts honed over years of active duty. They saw a large dog. They were blind to the warrior within. They were walking into a situation far more complex and dangerous than their planning accounted for. They were about to learn the difference between a pet and a protector trained for war. Sound, distant, wrong. A low rumble, inconsistent with the usual morning traffic on the highway miles away. Ares lifted his head from his paws, his ears swiveling like sophisticated radar dishes, pinpointing the source. Vehicle, slow, off the main road. He rose silently, the slight stiffness in his hind leg momentarily forgotten, and patted on massive paws towards the living room window, the one offering the clearest view of the long driveway and the access road beyond. He stayed back from the glass, a habit learned long ago. Never silhouette yourself. The vehicle, a dark van he didn't recognize, crawled past the entrance to their property, slowed further, then continued down the road before pulling off onto a barely visible track leading into the sparse woods bordering their land to the west. Unusual. Delivery trucks used the main drive. Neighbors, what few there were, didn't use that track. His senses, far keener than any human's, went into overdrive. The wind shifted, bringing faint, alien scents. Multiple individuals, unfamiliar sweat, gun oil, metal, the tang of adrenaline, faint but distinct. Threat assessment, potential. Monitoring initiated. He moved through the quiet house like a shadow, a slate-gray phantom against the cool interior walls. From the dining room window, he watched the edge of the woods. Nothing visible, but his ears picked up the subtle snap of a dry twig, the rustle of disturbed undergrowth inconsistent with normal wildlife movement. Two individuals, moving slowly, taking cover. He checked the eastern perimeter from the guest bedroom window. Another scent signature drifted from near the old, dilapidated shed at the far end of the property. One more, stationary, and the van. Still idling, he could hear its low thrumming, feel the vibration through the ground, even from this distance. Fourth individual. Command vehicle? His training, dormant but never gone, surged to the forefront. Perimeter breach, multiple unknowns, coordinated movement, weapons likely. His mission parameters were clear. Protect the designated assets, Eleanor, Chloe. Secure the designated location, the house. His breathing remained steady, controlled. Panic was counterproductive. He needed information. He needed to understand their intent. He continued his silent patrol, moving from window to window, tracking their positions, analyzing their behavior. They moved with a certain stealth, avoiding open spaces, using cover. Not amateurs. Hostile intent, probable. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, intensifying the heat outside. Inside, Ares remained cool, focused. He drank water, ate a small portion of the food Eleanor had left out, conserving energy. He recognized the pattern. Surveillance. Waiting. Waiting for what? The return of the assets. His muscles tilled, a low growl vibrating deep in his chest, quickly suppressed. Maintain silence. Maintain position. Observe and prepare. He settled near the foot of the stairs, a strategic position offering visibility of the front door and the main living area, while keeping the upper floor secure. He was calm, but every fiber of his being was alert, coiled, ready. The quiet ranch was no longer peaceful. It was a potential battlefield, and he was its sole defender. Chloe's school day unfolded with the usual rhythm of bells, chatter, and learning. She aced a pop quiz in math, diagrams the parts of a cell in science, and daydreamed through history class, mentally rehearsing her upcoming presentation. During lunch in the noisy cafeteria, she sat with her best friend Maya Chen, excitedly discussing plans for Maya's sleepover on Friday. "My mom said yes," Maya announced, pushing her glasses up her nose. "We can finish our volcano project for the science fair, watch Galaxy Guardian 7, and maybe even convince your mom to let Aries sleep in the living room with us." Chloe beamed. "He'd love that. You know how he thinks he's a lapdog. Last time you stayed over, he almost flattened you trying to cuddle on the beanbag chair." Both girls giggled, picturing the enormous Great Dane attempting to snuggle. Aries, despite his imposing size and background, had a surprisingly goofy, affectionate side, especially with Chloe and those she trusted, like Maya. The final bell rang at 3:10 p.m. Chloe and Maya walked out into the dazzling afternoon sun, joining the throng of students heading for buses and waiting cars. They chattered about homework and weekend plans as they stood near the designated pickup zone. "See you tomorrow," Maya waved as her mom's minivan pulled up, honking cheerfully. "Bye. Don't forget your sleeping bag Friday," Chloe called back. She settled onto a familiar sun-warmed bench to wait for her own mother. Usually, Eleanor's silver SUV was one of the first cars in line. Time ticked by. 3:15 became 3:20. The pickup area began to empty. 3:30 came and went. Chloe checked her phone. No messages, no missed calls. A knot of unease began to tighten in her stomach. Her mom was never late without calling or texting. Punctuality was practically Eleanor Caldwell's middle name. At 3:45, her phone finally buzzed. A text message notification lit up the screen. From Mom. Relief washed over Chloe, quickly followed by confusion as she read the message. "Running late at work, honey. Stuck in awful meeting. Walk home today? Beautiful afternoon for it. Love you." Chloe frowned, rereading the words. Something felt off. Her mom never asked her to walk home alone without arranging it beforehand. They lived over a mile from the school, down roads with narrow shoulders and infrequent traffic, but her mom was safety conscious to a fault. And the phrasing, "awful meeting, beautiful afternoon for it," it didn't sound like her mom's usual concise, slightly formal texting style. Plus the lack of their specific running late emoji code, a small detail, but one they always used. Hesitantly, but trusting the instinct screaming that something was wrong, Chloe typed back a reply, her fingers slightly clumsy. "Okay, what's the password?" It was their emergency check-in system, established by her dad years ago. A simple question, a specific, unchanging answer. Kestrel. If either of them was ever in trouble, being coerced, or unable to speak freely, they were to give the wrong password, a nonsensical answer, or simply not reply to the question at all. It was a lifeline Michael had insisted upon. The reply came back almost instantly. "Too fast. Don't be silly, honey. Password for what? Just start walking. I'll try to meet you halfway. See you soon." Ice flooded Chloe's veins. Wrong. Utterly, terrifyingly wrong. Her mom would never dismiss the password question. Never. Protocol was absolute. This wasn't her mom texting. Someone else had her phone. Someone was making her text. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Think, Chloe. Think. Dad's training. Stay calm. Assess. Act. With trembling fingers, she navigated to her emergency contacts. Mrs. Peterson, their elderly neighbor, sharp as a tack despite her age, who lived closer to the school side of their property. As the phone began to ring in her ear, Chloe stood up quickly, clutching her backpack, intending to walk swiftly back towards the school's main office. Tell an adult, call the police. She never made it more than 3 steps. A hand, rough and smelling faintly of gasoline, clamped hard over her mouth from behind, stifling her nascent scream. A strong arm snaked around her waist, lifting her clean off her feet like she weighed nothing. She kicked and thrashed wildly, dropping her phone, the ringing tone abruptly cutting off as it hit the pavement. "Stop struggling!" A harsh, accented voice hissed close to her ear. The accent was thick, unfamiliar. Eastern European? "Cooperate, little girl, and you won't get hurt. Fight and—" The threat hung heavy, unspoken but chillingly clear. She was carried struggling futilely towards a black van parked illegally in the adjacent teacher's lot. The same van Aries had clocked earlier. The back doors were wrenched open, and she was unceremoniously tossed inside onto the hard metal floor. Before she could even try to scramble away, rough hands seized her wrists and ankles, cinching plastic zip ties painfully tight. A wide strip of duct tape was slapped cruelly across her mouth, sealing her muffled cries. "Drive!" ordered the same harsh voice. The van's engine roared, tires squealing as it peeled out of the parking lot, turning sharply away from the direction of her home initially. Then making a series of turns Chloe recognized were doubling back, heading towards the ranch. Through the blinding terror, Chloe forced herself to focus, just as her father had taught her in their what-if scenarios. Observe, remember, 4 men, including the driver, all wearing dark clothes, ski masks obscuring their faces. Speaking accented English and another language she didn't recognize. Maybe Russian? The van smelled acrid. Cigarettes, gun oil, stale sweat, and her own sharp fear. One man in the back with her was speaking urgently into a phone. "We have the package. Confirmed target is secure at location." Chloe squeezed her eyes shut, tears leaking from the corners despite her efforts to be brave. She didn't pray for herself. She prayed for her mother, and she prayed that whoever these men were, whoever had forced her mom to send that text, they had no idea what awaited them. They didn't know about the guardian watching from the window. They didn't know about Aries. Eleanor drove home from her consultancy meeting in Henderson, a knot of unease tightening in her chest that had nothing to do with the complex encryption algorithms she'd spent the afternoon discussing. It was a vague, formless anxiety, a prickling sensation at the back of her neck she couldn't logically explain. She dismissed it as lingering stress, the ever-present hum of worry that came with being a single parent, the weight of responsibility. She turned off the main highway onto the quieter county road leading towards the ranch, the familiar landscape usually a source of comfort. Today it felt different, too quiet. The air seemed heavier, charged with an unseen static. Shaking her head, annoyed at her own fanciful thoughts, she focused on the road. Chloe would be home from school soon. Maybe they'd bake cookies tonight. As she turned into their long gravel driveway, she noticed it immediately. A faint set of tire tracks veering off the drive towards the woods, tracks that shouldn't be there. Her unease spiked into genuine alarm. She slowed the SUV, scanning the property line. Everything looked normal. The house stood silent, the barn door was closed, no sign of Aries outside. But the feeling of being watched was suddenly intensely palpable. She pulled up near the house, switching off the engine. The abrupt silence felt deafening. Before she could even unbuckle her seatbelt, her driver's side door was wrenched open. A man loomed there, face obscured by a black ski mask, a silenced pistol held low but aimed unwaveringly at her. Simultaneously, the passenger door opened, revealing another masked figure, also armed. "Do not scream. Do not resist," the first man ordered, his voice flat, accented. "Get out of the vehicle. Slowly." Eleanor's heart leaped into her throat, pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her mind raced, trying to process the impossible. This wasn't happening. Not here. Not to them. Chloe. The thought was a shard of ice in her chest. Was Chloe safe? Had they gotten to her first? Her hands shaking, she fumbled with the seatbelt buckle, her movements sluggish with shock. "What do you want?" she managed, her voice thin, reedy. "Information. Cooperation," the man said curtly. "Now get out. Hands where I can see them." She complied, stepping out onto the gravel, acutely aware of her vulnerability. As she turned toward the house, 2 more figures emerged from the dense shrubbery near the porch, materializing like phantoms. 4 men, all masked, armed, moving with a practiced, predatory efficiency that spoke of planning and ruthless intent. They flanked her, pressing her toward the front door. "My daughter," she began, her voice trembling, "is not our primary concern." Yet, the apparent leader, the one who had opened her door, the one whose cold eyes seemed to bore through the mask, cut her off. "Your cooperation determines her relevance." He nodded towards the front door. "Unlock it." Her fingers fumbled with the keys, the familiar jingle sounding jarringly loud in the tense silence. As the deadbolt clicked open, the leader pushed her inside, the others following closely, spreading out, checking rooms with swift, professional movements. The leader shoved her towards the living room. "Sit!" He gestured towards an armchair. Eleanor sank into it, her legs suddenly weak. Another man, the tech specialist by the looks of the equipment bag he carried, was already examining the router and security panel near the entryway. "System is basic. Wireless cams easily jammed. No pressure sensors, no hardwired alarms to central station," the tech reported in the same accented English. "Child's play." The leader, who she now mentally tagged as Sokolov, based on the deference of the others, turned back to her. He pulled out her own cell phone, which must have been taken from her purse in the car. "Your daughter gets out of school soon. You will text her. Tell her you are running late. Tell her to walk home." "No," Eleanor gasped, shaking her head vehemently. "Please leave her out of this. Whatever you want, money, access, I'll give it to you. Just don't involve my child." Sokolov stepped closer, his presence menacing. He took off his mask then, revealing a hard, cruel face with flat cheekbones and eyes like chips of ice. "We require leverage, Doctor. Caldwell, Insurance, to ensure your full cooperation." He held the phone out to her. "You will text her. Use your normal language. No codes, no tricks. If you refuse, or if we suspect anything, my associate Dmitri will drive to the school and retrieve her himself. His methods are less gentle." He nodded towards the wiry man near the window, whose eyes glinted behind his mask. Eleanor's blood ran cold. The image of Chloe being manhandled, terrified. It was unbearable. She looked around the room, desperate for any sign of hope, any advantage. Her eyes flickered towards the top of the stairs. Was Ares up there? Had he hidden? Or had they already? She couldn't bear that thought either. Then for a fleeting, almost imperceptible moment, she saw movement in the shadows of the upstairs landing. A subtle shift, a pair of intelligent amber eyes meeting hers across the distance. Ares. He was there. He was hidden. He was waiting. In that split-second connection, a silent command passed between them, an understanding forged in shared grief and unwavering loyalty. "Wait. Be ready." Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Eleanor took the phone, her hands trembling violently. She typed the message Sokolov dictated, her heart aching with each word, praying Chloe would recognize the deviation, the wrongness of it. She hit send. Moments later, her phone buzzed with Chloe's reply. "Okay, what's the password?" A tiny flicker of fierce pride ignited within Eleanor's terror. "Good girl, Chloe. Remember your training." Sokolov snatched the phone back before she could even think of replying correctly. "Password?" he snarled, reading the message. He glared at Eleanor. "What password?" It's just a silly game we play," Eleanor stammered, trying to sound dismissive. Sokolov wasn't buying it. His eyes narrowed suspiciously. With swift, angry movements, he typed a response himself, overriding the crucial security protocol. "Don't be silly, honey. Password for what?" He tossed the phone onto the coffee table. "Now we wait," Sokolov declared, settling into Michael's favorite leather armchair opposite her, radiating smug confidence. His men took up positions around the room, weapons held ready, their masked faces impassive. Sergei continued tinkering with his electronic devices, setting up a laptop. "Your daughter will arrive. You will then access the bank systems for us. A simple transaction. Cooperate fully, Doctor, and perhaps you and the girl walk away." Eleanor said nothing, her hands clenched into fists in her lap, her nails digging into her palms. She could smell Sokolov's cloying cologne, the metallic scent of the guns, the fear coiling in her own stomach. But beneath the fear, a cold, hard anger was solidifying. They had invaded her home, threatened her child, desecrated the memory of her husband. They had underestimated her, and they had definitely underestimated the silent warrior waiting upstairs. She kept her gaze lowered, but her senses were hyper-alert. She listened to the ticking grandfather clock in the hall, the quiet breathing of the men, the frantic thumping of her own heart, and she waited. Waited for the inevitable arrival of the black van. Waited for the signal. Waited for Ares. From his vantage point in the shadowed upstairs hallway, Ares had observed everything. He had remained utterly still, barely breathing, as the intruders forced Eleanor inside. He had registered her scent, the familiar lavender and vanilla, overlaid with the sharp, acrid tang of terror. He had seen the guns, analyzed the intruders' movements, recognized their tactical formation. His training screamed at him. Hostage situation, multiple armed hostiles. Primary asset, Eleanor, under direct threat. His protective instincts warred violently with the ingrained discipline of years of service. Every muscle fiber screamed to launch himself down the stairs, to meet the threat head-on. But he saw the guns trained on Eleanor. He recognized the cold calculation in the leader's eyes. A direct assault now would endanger her further. Michael's voice echoed in his memory, from countless training simulations. Patience, havoc, assess. Identify the critical moment. Control the engagement. He watched as Eleanor was forced to text Chloe. He felt her fear, her desperation. And then he saw the flicker in her eyes as they met his. The silent command. Wait. He understood. They had a plan, unspoken but clear. He remained motionless when Chloe's reply came, asking for the password. He saw Sokolov snatch the phone, overriding the protocol. Error. Tactical error. The intruders were confident, arrogant. They didn't understand the asset they were trying to manipulate. Then came the sound he'd been dreading, yet expecting. The low rumble of the black van pulling into the driveway. His muscles bunched, coiling like powerful springs. He heard the van doors open, muffled shouts. The heart-wrenching sound of Chloe's terrified, muffled cries as she was dragged from the vehicle. Secondary asset, Chloe, acquired by hostiles. Threat level, critical. The front door opened again. Chloe was shoved inside, stumbling, her wrists and ankles bound with zip ties, duct tape sealing her mouth. Her eyes, wide with terror, immediately found her mother's. "Mom!" she cried out the instant one of the men ripped the tape from her mouth, the sound raw, desperate. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby," Eleanor choked out, trying to project a calm she didn't feel, reaching for her daughter. "It's going to be okay." Sokolov intervened, grabbing Chloe roughly by the arm, pulling her away from Eleanor toward the center of the room. He used her small frame as a shield, positioning her between himself and Eleanor. "That depends entirely on your mother's cooperation, little girl," he sneered, turning his icy gaze back to Eleanor. "Now, Dr. Caldwell, about those bank systems. Sergei is ready." That was the moment, the critical juncture. The hostile leader was momentarily focused on Eleanor. The man holding Chloe, Dmitri, was slightly off balance, distracted by Sokolov's command. The other two hostiles were positioned near the doorway and window, their attention divided. Optimal window for engagement. Ares didn't hesitate. There was no conscious thought, only pure distilled instinct, honed by years of relentless training. He launched himself from the top of the stairs, not with a warning bark, but in lethal silence. 170 pounds of focused fury, propelled by explosive power. His target, Dmitri, the immediate threat to Chloe. He hit the man mid-torso like a furry missile, the impact driving the air from Dmitri's lungs with a sickening whoosh. Before Dmitri could react, Ares' powerful jaws clamped down on the man's forearm, the one gripping Chloe, with precisely calculated pressure. Not the full bone-shattering force he was capable of, but enough to disable, to cause agonizing pain, to force compliance. Dmitri screamed, a high-pitched sound of shock and agony, his grip on Chloe instantly releasing as his arm exploded in pain. He stumbled backward, dropping his pistol, which clattered across the hardwood floor. Chloe fell to her knees, momentarily stunned, but blessedly free. The room erupted into chaos. Shouts, curses in a foreign tongue, the scrape of boots on wood. Ares released Dimitri's mangled arm and spun, landing silently, positioning himself instantly between the fallen man, Chloe and Eleanor, and the remaining threats. His lips peeled back from his formidable teeth, revealing long, white canines. A low, guttural growl rumbled up from his deep chest, a sound far more terrifying than any bark, a primal promise of violence that resonated through the room like subterranean thunder. His entire body radiated menace, a controlled fury that was terrifying to behold. "Shoot it! Shoot the beast!" Sokolov shrieked, fumbling to raise his own pistol, his face contorted with disbelief and rage. But Ares was already moving again. Firearm. Priority threat. He surged forward, ignoring the screaming Dimitri on the floor. His attack was a blur of gray muscle. He didn't go for the kill. His training focused on neutralization. His jaws closed around Sokolov's wrist, the one holding the gun. The sickening crunch of bone echoed in the sudden, shocked silence. Sokolov screamed again, a higher, more desperate sound this time, his pistol flying from his grasp, skittering towards the kitchen doorway. He collapsed, clutching his shattered wrist, his face pale with shock and agony. The instant Ares launched his attack, Eleanor's own training, the self-defense courses Michael had insisted she take, the countless what-if discussions, kicked in. The shock paralyzing her moments before evaporated, replaced by a surge of adrenaline and fierce maternal instinct. As Dimitri dropped Chloe, Eleanor scrambled forward, pulling her daughter behind the relative safety of the overturned coffee table. "Stay down, Chloe. Stay low," she commanded, her voice surprisingly steady. Her eyes scanned the room, assessing the rapidly changing situation. Ares engaging Sokolov, Dimitri incapacitated on the floor, moaning. Two hostiles remaining, Ivan and Sergei, near the front door, momentarily frozen, their weapons half raised, clearly stunned by the sudden, brutal effectiveness of the house pet. Then she saw it, the pistol Sokolov had dropped, lying near the threshold of the kitchen. While Ares kept the remaining intruders pinned with his terrifying growl and focused stare, Eleanor moved. Low and fast, she scrambled across the floor and snatched up the weapon. It felt heavy, alien, but strangely solid in her trembling hand. She clicked off the safety, just as Michael had taught her, gripping it firmly in both hands, aiming it toward the two remaining men. Ivan and Sergei found themselves in an utterly untenable position. Their leader was down, screaming, his wrist clearly broken. Dimitri was similarly incapacitated, and now they faced not only a snarling, blood-flecked Great Dane that moved with the deadly precision of a trained killer, but also the seemingly terrified mother, who was now armed and pointing a pistol at them with unnerving steadiness. Ares shifted his weight, his growl deepening, taking a half-step towards them. The blood smeared on his muzzle wasn't his own. His amber eyes, locked onto theirs, held no fear, only lethal intent. The message was clear: advance and you die. Their nerve broke. Terror trumped training. Ivan, closest to the door, made a split-second decision. He turned and bolted, yanking the front door open and sprinting out into the blinding sunlight, abandoning his comrades. Sergei hesitated for a fraction of a second, glancing at his fallen leader, then at the snarling dog and the armed woman. He dropped his weapon with a clatter, hands shooting up into the air, palms forward in a universal gesture of surrender. "Ned, not yet! Don't shoot! Please!" he stammered, his eyes wide with terror behind his mask. Ares allowed Ivan to flee. Threat disengaged, choosing flight over fight. His training dictated prioritizing the immediate active threats. He kept his focus pinned on Sergei, the growl still rumbling, ready to react to any sudden move. "On your knees," Eleanor ordered, her voice ringing with newfound authority, cutting through the adrenaline haze. "Now, face down, hands behind your head, interlock your fingers." Sobbing, Sergei scrambled to obey, collapsing onto the floor, assuming the position. The immediate violence was over. Silence descended again, broken only by Sokolov's pained groans, Dmitri's whimpering, Sergei's ragged breathing, and the low, continuous growl from Ares, who remained vigilant, positioned protectively between his family and the neutralized threats. Within 10 minutes, the distant wail of sirens grew steadily louder, converging on the isolated ranch. Chloe's aborted call to Mrs. Peterson had worked. The sharp-witted elderly woman, hearing the scuffle and the abruptly disconnected call after Chloe failed to answer her return call, had immediately dialed 911, reporting a possible home invasion or abduction in progress at the Caldwell place. Multiple patrol cars from the Nye County Sheriff's Department roared up the gravel driveway, followed closely by unmarked sedans carrying FBI agents. Sokolov's crew, involved in interstate financial crimes and likely linked to international organizations, had tripped federal interest. The Tranquil Ranch property was suddenly swarming with uniformed officers, plainclothes detectives, and paramedics. Officers stormed the house, weapons drawn, securing the scene with practiced efficiency. They found Eleanor still holding the pistol trained on the prone Sergei, Chloe huddled behind her, and Ares standing unwavering guard over them both, his low growl finally subsiding into watchful silence as the uniformed officers took control. Sokolov and Dmitri were quickly handcuffed, their injuries assessed by incoming paramedics. A perimeter was established, and officers began a search for Ivan, the fugitive who had fled. As paramedics gently checked Eleanor and Chloe for injuries, finding only scrapes, bruises, and profound shock, Ares finally relaxed his rigid stance, but only slightly. He sat down between Eleanor and Chloe on the living room floor, pressing his solid weight against them both, a warm, reassuring presence amidst the chaos. Chloe buried her face in his thick fur, her tears finally flowing freely, soaking his slate-gray coat. "You saved us, Ares," she whispered, her voice muffled. "You saved us. You're not just a retired war dog. You're our hero. Dad would be so proud." Ares turned his massive head, nudging her gently before giving her cheek a soft lick. His tail gave a single, slow thump against the floorboards. Mission accomplished, assets secure, but his eyes continued to scan the room, tracking the movements of the officers, the paramedics, the detectives taking statements. His training wouldn't let him fully stand down until the situation was completely resolved, until his charges were unequivocally safe. Eleanor reached out a trembling hand, stroking his broad head. "Good boy, Ares," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "Good soldier." Looking into those intelligent amber eyes, she saw not just a dog, but the embodiment of Michael's love and foresight, a promise kept across the veil of death itself. Statements were taken, evidence was meticulously collected. The discarded weapons, the zip ties, Sergei's laptop containing incriminating plans, the tranquilizer gun found in Dmitri's pocket, unused. Mrs. Peterson arrived, fussing over Chloe and Eleanor, providing her own statement about the suspicious call. The sheer professionalism of the intruders, coupled with their specific targeting of Eleanor's financial expertise, quickly elevated the case beyond a simple robbery. The FBI agents confirmed Sokolov was a known operative for a powerful Eastern European syndicate specializing in high-stakes financial crime. They had severely underestimated the security at the Caldwell Ranch, not the electronic systems, but the canine one. As the suspects were led away in handcuffs, Sokolov glaring daggers at Ares as he was helped into an ambulance, and the initial wave of emergency responders began to clear, a sense of surreal calm descended. The sun still shone brightly, the desert landscape remained indifferent, but everything had changed. The days immediately following the attack were a blur of interviews, follow-up visits from law enforcement, insurance adjusters, and the quiet, heavy work of processing the trauma. The house felt both violated and, paradoxically, safer than ever, knowing the extent of Ares's protective capabilities. Sleep was elusive for both Eleanor and Chloe, punctuated by nightmares and sudden noises that sent jolts of adrenaline through them. The FBI, working with Eleanor, helped coordinate a major security upgrade for the ranch, state-of-the-art sensors, reinforced doors and windows, direct lines to law enforcement. But Eleanor knew their most effective security system was currently lying on the rug at her feet, occasionally twitching an ear or sighing softly in his sleep. Aries, too, showed signs of the ordeal's toll. He became even more vigilant, insisting on accompanying Chloe everywhere around the property, positioning himself strategically in rooms to observe all entrances, his periods of deep sleep shorter, his sensitivity to unexpected sounds heightened for a time. He rarely left Eleanor or Chloe's side, a constant, reassuring shadow. Eleanor consulted with a veterinarian specializing in animal behavior and PTSD, implementing strategies to help Aries decompress. Long, quiet walks in the desert, predictable routines, positive reinforcement, and plenty of quiet reassurance. Chloe, remarkably resilient but understandably shaken, began seeing a child psychologist specializing in trauma. She talked about her fear, the feeling of helplessness in the van, but also about her pride in remembering her father's safety protocols and her unwavering faith in Aries. Therapy helped her process the events, giving her tools to cope with the lingering anxiety and nightmares. Eleanor found her own solace in routine, in poring over historical documents for her research, finding comfort in the structured narratives of the past when her present felt so chaotic. She took a leave of absence from her consultancy work, needing time to focus on her daughter and their shared healing. She also spent hours simply sitting with Aries, stroking his fur, talking softly to him, finding a unique comfort in his silent companionship, knowing he understood more than words could express. They were survivors, all three of them, bound together by shared loss and a shared ordeal. News of the incident, particularly the role of the retired MWD, spread through the local community and eventually reached military circles. Cards and letters arrived from neighbors, friends, even strangers touched by their story. Maya's family brought over casseroles and offered unwavering support. The community wrapped its arms around the Caldwells, offering a buffer against the lingering fear. Updates came from the FBI. Ivan, the man who fled, was apprehended trying to cross the state line a day later. Sokolov, Dmitry, and Sergei, facing a mountain of evidence and federal charges ranging from kidnapping and assault to conspiracy and attempted wire fraud, were denied bail. The wheels of justice were turning, slowly but surely. A month after the attack, Heroes Week arrived at Chloe's middle school. The atmosphere in the gymnasium was buzzing as students prepared to give presentations on people, or in some cases, animals they considered heroes. When Chloe's turn came, a special guest accompanied her to the podium. Aries walked calmly beside her, his massive frame drawing gasps and murmurs from the assembled students and teachers. He wore his old ceremonial Marine Corps vest, adorned with service ribbons, a privilege granted by special permission from the school principal and coordinated with Eleanor. He sat regally beside Chloe as she stood at the microphone, his amber eyes scanning the room with quiet dignity, completely unfazed by the crowd. Chloe, nervous but resolute, took a deep breath. "My hero is Aries," she began, her voice clear and steady. "Some of you might just see a really big dog, but Aries is much more than that. He's a United States Marine." She spoke about his service in Afghanistan alongside her father, Captain Michael Caldwell. She explained what MWDs do, detecting explosives, protecting soldiers, saving lives. She didn't dwell on the graphic details of the attack at their home, but she spoke bravely about how Aries' training, loyalty, and courage had saved her and her mother from dangerous men. Some people think that when soldiers, human or canine, retire, their service is over. Chloe continued, looking out at her classmates. They think they just become normal. But Aries taught me that's not true. The instinct to protect, the loyalty, the bravery, that doesn't just disappear, it just finds a new mission. She reached down and stroked Aries' head. Aries was trained to face danger in a war zone far away. But his most important mission turned out to be right here, at home. He protected his family. He didn't just chase bad guys, he defended the people he loves. That's what makes him my hero. A hush fell over the gymnasium as she finished. Then applause erupted, loud, sustained, and heartfelt. Students and teachers alike were visibly moved. Eleanor, watching from the back, wiped tears from her eyes, her heart swelling with pride for her daughter's strength and her dog's quiet nobility. Aries looked up at Chloe, nudging her hand gently, then resumed his calm, watchful scan of the room. He seemed content, accepting the accolades with the quiet dignity of a warrior who sought no praise, only the successful completion of his duty. A few weeks later, another visitor arrived at the Caldwell Ranch. Colonel Vance, a stern but fair-looking Marine officer who now oversaw the MWD program at Camp Pendleton, had driven up from California specifically to see them. He had known Captain Caldwell and had followed Aries' career with interest. The news of the incident had reached his office, generating considerable discussion. He sat with Eleanor on the porch swing, sipping iced tea, while Chloe threw a sturdy Kong toy for Aries in the yard. Despite the graying muzzle and the slight limp, Aries moved with incredible power and precision, his focus absolute. "I'm not surprised, Eleanor," Colonel Vance said, his eyes fixed on the Great Dane. "Not one bit. Aries, Havoc as we knew him, was exceptional, intelligent, loyal, with an uncanny ability to read situations and react appropriately. That kind of training, that kind of bond with a handler like Michael, it becomes part of their DNA. It doesn't just switch off with retirement." He turned to Eleanor, his expression serious but kind. "Michael always said Aries was special, even among the best MWDs. He had a protective instinct that went beyond the training manuals. Seems he was right." He paused. "We've had several inquiries, actually. The story has resonated. We'd like to potentially use Aries' story, with your permission, of course, in our training programs, both for new handlers and for discussing the importance of our MWD adoption and retirement protocols. It's a powerful example of the lifelong commitment these dogs make, and why ensuring they have supportive homes after service is so critical." Eleanor watched Aries trot back to Chloe, dropping the toy at her feet, his tail giving a slow wag. "Of course, Colonel," she agreed softly. "People should understand. These dogs never truly stop serving. They just find new ways, new missions. Aries' mission is here now, protecting us, and he does it with the same dedication he showed serving alongside Michael." "Michael would be incredibly proud," Colonel Vance said quietly, "of Aries, and of Chloe and you, for giving him the home, the purpose he deserved." Before leaving, the colonel presented Aries with a small, unofficial commendation ribbon for exceptional service in a civilian capacity, clipping it carefully onto his old Marine vest, which Eleanor kept displayed in the living room. Aries sniffed it curiously, then seemed to stand a little taller. That evening, the familiar rhythm of peace settled back over the Caldwell Ranch. Eleanor sat on the back porch reading, while Chloe lay sprawled on a blanket nearby, sketching in her notebook. Aries lay between them, stretched out, seemingly dozing in the cooling twilight air as the setting sun painted the desert sky in breathtaking hues of orange, purple, and gold. But Eleanor knew he wasn't truly asleep. An ear would twitch at the distant cry of a coyote. His head would lift slightly at the sound of a car passing on the far-off highway. He remained ever vigilant, ever watchful. He was their guardian, their protector, their unlikely hero. But more than that, he was the living, breathing embodiment of Michael's enduring love, a promise kept, a connection that transcended loss. Later that night, long after Chloe had gone to bed, with Aries taking up his customary position on the rug beside her bed, Eleanor sat alone at the kitchen table. An old photo album lay open before her. She found the picture she'd been searching for. Michael in his dusty camouflage uniform, kneeling beside a younger, leaner Aries in the Afghan sun, both looking towards the camera, exhaustion clear in their eyes but an undeniable bond radiating between them, taken just weeks before the final, fatal patrol. Eleanor gently traced the outline of her husband's smiling face with her fingertip. "You knew, didn't you, Michael?" she whispered to the photograph, tears blurring her vision. "You knew he was more than just a working dog. You knew he'd keep us safe when you couldn't be here anymore." A soft whine broke the silence. Aries stood in the kitchen doorway, having momentarily left his post beside Chloe to check on Eleanor. His nails clicked softly on the tile as he patted over, resting his heavy head gently on her lap. His amber eyes gazed intently at the photograph, a flicker of something akin to recognition, or perhaps just shared memory within their depths. "He misses you too, you know," Eleanor murmured, scratching behind his ears. "Chloe asked me the other day if he missed being a military dog. I told her I thought he'd found his most important mission right here." Aries leaned into her touch, his body emitting a low sigh of contentment. His presence was a solid, comforting weight against her legs. In moments like these, the profound intelligence and quiet nobility of the animal beside her were almost overwhelming. He wasn't just a dog. He was a warrior who had found peace, a guardian who had found purpose, a companion who had found love. The next morning dawned bright and clear, another peaceful day unfolding at the Caldwell Ranch. Chloe came downstairs to find her mother making pancakes, the comforting aroma filling the kitchen. Aries lay near the kitchen island, observing the proceedings with quiet concentration. Their routines had subtly shifted since the attack. Aries now performed a thorough perimeter check of the immediate yard each morning before Chloe went outside, and he always positioned himself to have a clear line of sight to both the main door and whichever family member he was shadowing. "Mom," Chloe said thoughtfully, sliding onto a stool at the island, "remember how Dad used to say that sometimes the hardest battle for a soldier isn't overseas, but learning how to come home and live in peace?" Eleanor paused, spatula in midair, nodding slowly. "I remember him saying that, yes." "Well," Chloe continued, reaching out to stroke Aries' broad head, "I think that's what Aries did. He was incredibly brave in Afghanistan, fighting bad guys and finding bombs. But maybe it was just as brave for him to come here, after losing Dad, and learn how to be our dog, especially with all his echoes." She searched for the right word. "His PTSD. And then, when we needed him to be a soldier again, he knew how. He could be both." Eleanor felt a familiar sting behind her eyes, moved by her daughter's insight. "That's a very wise way to put it, sweetheart. Your father would be incredibly proud of how you helped him find his peace." "We helped each other," Chloe said simply, leaning her head against Aries' sturdy shoulder. "After Dad, well, I needed someone who understood missing him that much." Aries knew. Aries pressed closer, his tail thumping softly against the cabinet, a silent affirmation. The bond between girl and dog, forged in mutual grief and strengthened by shared trauma, was unbreakable. Chloe's nightmares had faded, replaced by the reassuring presence of the guardian beside her bed. Life settled into a new kind of normal, a normal underscored by a heightened awareness, a deeper appreciation for their safety, and an immeasurable gratitude for the four-legged veteran in their midst. Aries remained their vigilant protector, his military past an indelible part of him, but his present was defined by his devotion to his family. He might be retired from the battlefields of a distant war, but Aries had found something profound and fiercely worth fighting for right here, under the vast Nevada sky. He had found his home. He had found his pack. He had found his final, most vital mission. And as long as he drew breath, he would stand his watch. Some might call it instinct, others training. Eleanor and Chloe knew better. It was loyalty. It was courage. It was love, pure and unwavering. The love of a soldier for his family, a promise kept, a warrior who had finally, truly come home. He was Aries Caldwell, retired Marine, cherished family member, guardian until the end. And he wouldn't have it any other way.